The woman in the emerald silk dress was bleeding from a 3-inch gash on her shin, but she kept singing anyway, her voice soaring over the chaos of spilled champagne and broken glass that littered the grand ballroom floor. Lena Martinez gripped the microphone tighter, forcing herself to finish the last chorus of At Last, even as blood trickled down into her silver heels. The bride, Christina Harcourt, was crying happy tears in her new husband's arms, completely oblivious to the fact that her wedding singer had just sliced her leg open on a champagne flute some drunk groomsman had knocked off a table. The accident had happened mid-song, but Lena refused to ruin this moment. She had built her reputation on professionalism, and a little blood wasn't going to change that. As the final note hung in the air, the crowd erupted in applause. Lena smiled through the throbbing pain and gave a small bow before stepping carefully off the stage, mindful of the glass still scattered across the marble floor. She needed to find the bathroom, clean herself up, and figure out if she needed stitches or just a really good bandage. "Excuse me." The voice was deep, authoritative, and came from directly behind her. Lena turned, nearly colliding with a man who had to be at least 6'3". Dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes the color of slate in a storm. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that probably cost more than her entire year's rent, and he was looking at her with an intensity that made her forget about the pain in her leg for exactly 3 seconds. "You're bleeding," he said, his gaze dropping to her shin. "I'm aware," Lena replied, trying to step around him. "I was just heading to clean it up. Let me help." It wasn't really a question. He placed a hand on her elbow, steady and warm, and guided her through the crowd with the kind of ease that suggested people usually moved out of his way without needing to be asked. "I'm fine, really. I don't want to take you away from the reception. Injury to make of sure my COOKING together in the coster had her perfect moment," he said, leading her down a hallway lined with oil paintings that probably belonged in a museum. "Sure you don't BLEEDALEXANDEROUT in the SFA ROG." That made Lena stop walking. "Your sister. You're Christina's brother. Guilty. Alexander Harcourt. ILIKEASM suite with plush furniture and a marble bathroom visible through an open doorway. Sit. I'll get the first aid kit." Lena lowered herself onto an expensive-looking cream sofa, suddenly very aware that she was dripping blood on what was probably antique upholstery. "I'm going to ruin your furniture." "I own the hotel," Alexander said from the bathroom, his voice carrying easily. "I think I can handle a cleaning bill." Of course he owned the hotel. The Harcourt Grand wasn't just any hotel. It was the premier luxury destination in the city, the kind of place where rooms started at $1,000 a night and went up from there. Lena had been thrilled to book this gig, not just for the generous pay but for the networking opportunities. Rich people loved telling their rich friends about talented wedding singers. Alexander emerged with a professional-looking first aid kit and knelt in front of her without hesitation, his expensive suit pants hitting the floor like it was nothing. Up close, Lena could see the faint lines around his eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jaw. He had to be in his early 30s, maybe 32 or 33, just a few years older than her own 28. "This is going to sting," he warned, pulling out antiseptic wipes. "I've had worse." Lena tried to keep her voice light, but she sucked in a sharp breath when he pressed the wipe against the cut. "Sorry." His touch gentled immediately, one hand wrapping around her calf, to hold her leg steady while the other cleaned the wound with surprising care. "You were incredible up there." That song, the way you sang it, I've never heard it like that before. Heat crept up Lena's neck that had nothing to do with pain. Thank you. Your sister picked all the songs herself. She has good taste. Christina's always had an ear for music. Alexander pulled out butterfly bandages and began carefully closing the wound. But it takes more than good song selection to make people feel what you made them feel tonight. You have a real gift. Lena wasn't used to compliments from men who looked like Alexander Harcourt. She spent most of her time singing at weddings, corporate events, and the occasional bar gig. The men she usually met were either married, drunk, or both. This man was neither. He was focused, gentle, and looking at her like she was the most interesting thing in the room. "What's your name?" he asked, securing the last bandage. Lena Martinez. Beautiful name." He sat back on his heels, examining his handiwork. "I think you'll live, Lena Martinez, but you should probably stay off your feet for a bit. Let me get you some ice and something to drink." "I should get back out there. I have 2 more sets to sing tonight." Alexander frowned. "You're injured." "I'm bandaged. There's a difference." Lena started to stand, but his hand on her knee stopped her. "At least take a 15-minute break. Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "No, but I'm the guy paying your check, and I'm telling you to take 15 minutes. His tone was firm but not unkind. "Besides, I want to make you an offer, and I'd rather do it when you're not rushing off to perform." That caught her attention. "An offer?" Alexander stood, moving to a small bar cart in the corner and pouring 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He handed her one and sat down in the chair across from her, his posture relaxed, but somehow still commanding attention. "The reception is winding down in about 2 hours, he said. "After everyone leaves, after Christina and her husband head off on their honeymoon, I'd like you to stay. Sing 1 more song, just for me." Lena's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Just for you? A private performance. I'll pay you triple your usual rate. You don't even know my usual rate. I looked at your contract. Triple it. 1 song, your choice, in the empty ballroom." His gray eyes held hers. "I've spent the last 6 months planning this wedding, making sure every detail was perfect for Christina. I haven't had a moment to just listen to music, to feel anything that wasn't related to vendor schedules and seating charts. Tonight, listening to you sing, was the first time in months I've felt like I could actually breathe. I'd like to have that feeling again, without 200 people demanding my attention." There was something raw in his voice, something that made Lena believe this wasn't just about the music. This was a man who carried weight on his shoulders, who was used to being in control, being responsible for everything and everyone. And for some reason, her singing had given him a moment of peace. "Okay," she heard herself say, "1 song after the reception ends, but I get to pick it. Deal." Alexander's smile transformed his whole face, softening the hard edges into something warm and genuine. Being a W-A-Y from thing. H-A-T-E-D-I-N that T-I-E-R couldn't R, U-P-T their E-when-I them. A woman in a black suit poked her head in, her expression all business. "Mr. Harcourt, they need you for the cake cutting." "I'll be right there." Alexander stood, buttoning his suit jacket. He looked down at Lena. "Can you walk?" She tested her leg, standing carefully. The bandages held, and while it hurt, it wasn't unbearable. "I'm good. If you need anything at all, tell any staff member, they'll find me." He paused at the door. "And Lena, thank you for finishing the song, for staying professional even when you were hurt. Christina will never know how close her moment came to being interrupted, and that's because of you." Then he was gone, and Lena was left alone in the luxurious private room, her heart beating faster than it had any right to. She pressed her fingers to her cheeks and found them warm. This was ridiculous. Alexander Harcourt was a billionaire, a hotel magnate, someone who probably dated models and actresses. She was a wedding singer with a carefully managed career that covered her bills, and not much else. Whatever this was, this strange connection she'd felt when he'd knelt in front of her and bandaged her leg with such care, it couldn't be anything real. Could it? Lena made her way back to the reception, testing her leg with each step. Though exactly as opulent as she'd remembered, all crystal chandeliers and but I am gold elling, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Thin TEARS were SLIGHTLY, as some streamed down GUESTS. Stepped out onto the terrace for cigars and conversation. To all of it, Christina and her new husband, more serious than I've ever been about anything Arcus, itu feed each other cake while a photographer captured every angle. And there was Alexander, standing slightly apart from the crowd, his phone to his ear. Even from across the room, Lena could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched into a fist. Whatever conversation he was having, it wasn't a pleasant one. As she watched, he ended the call and slipped the phone into his pocket, his expression smoothing into pleasant neutrality before he rejoined the celebration. The rest of the night passed in a blur of ballads and up-tempo numbers. Lena's leg throbbed with each movement, but she'd learned long ago how to perform through discomfort. The key was to let the music take over, to lose herself in the melody until nothing else mattered. Between sets, she caught Alexander watching her from various points in the room. Not obviously, not in a way that would draw attention, but she felt his gaze like a physical touch, warm and intent. Around 11:30, Christina and Marcus made their grand exit through a shower of sparklers and rose petals. The crowd began to disperse after that, guests claiming coats and calling cars, their laughter echoing through the marble hallways. Lena helped the DJ pack up some equipment, chatted with a few lingering guests who wanted to compliment her performance, and tried not to think about the fact that she'd agreed to stay behind for a private performance. This was crazy. She should just slip out, claim her leg was bothering her, go home to her small apartment and her cat and her normal, predictable life. Instead, she found herself freshening up in the bathroom, touching up her lipstick, and making her way back to the now-empty ballroom. Almost empty. Alexander stood at the far end, near the windows, his tie loosened and his jacket discarded. He'd rolled up his shirt sleeves, and something about that casual gesture made him seem more human, more accessible. The waitstaff was clearing the last of the tables, but at a subtle gesture from Alexander, they filed out quickly, leaving just the two of them in the vast, glittering space. "You stayed," he said, crossing the room to meet her. "I gave you my word." Lena set down her bag and approached the small stage where she'd spent the evening. "Do you have a preference?" "Slow, fast, something in between. Whatever speaks to you right now." That was a dangerous question. What spoke to her right now was the way Alexander was looking at her, like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve, a mystery he was determined to unravel. What spoke to her was the flutter in her stomach, the awareness of how alone they were, how the city lights glittered through the windows like scattered diamonds. Lena picked up her acoustic guitar, the one she used for more intimate performances, and settled onto the stool. She adjusted the microphone and strummed a few experimental chords, letting the music guide her choice. "This is a song I wrote," she said, surprising herself. She never performed her original work at gigs. It was too personal, too revealing. But something about this moment, about Alexander standing there with his hands in his pockets and his full attention on her, made her want to share something real. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, before building into something stronger. The lyrics were about second chances, about finding something unexpected in the middle of chaos, about the courage it took to reach for connection when you'd been alone for so long. She'd written it after her last relationship had ended badly, after she'd spent 6 months convinced she was better off solo. But singing it now, with Alexander as her audience of one, the words took on new meaning. She watched him as she sang. Watched the way his expression shifted from polite interest to genuine emotion, the way his jaw tightened when she hit the bridge, the way his eyes never left her face. When she finished, the silence stretched between them like a living thing, charged with possibility. "That was," Alexander started, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "Lena, that was extraordinary. You wrote that. About a year ago. I've never performed it publicly before. Why not? Too personal, I guess. Easier to hide behind other people's words." He moved closer, climbing the 2 steps to the stage so they were nearly eye level. "Thank you for sharing it with me, for trusting me with something that personal." Lena set down her guitar carefully, aware of how close he was, how she could smell his cologne now, something expensive and subtle. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really want me to stay? It's not just about the music, is it?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but it was tired, almost sad. "You're perceptive." "No, it's not just about the music, though your talent is undeniable. The truth is, I've spent the last 6 months drowning in responsibility. My father passed away last year, and he left me the company, all the hotels, all the businesses, everything. Christina took it hard. This wedding was her dream, and I wanted to give her one perfect day where she didn't have to think about loss or grief, or any of the things we've been dealing with as a family. But in the process of making sure everyone else was okay, I forgot to check on myself." He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfectly styled strands. "Tonight, watching you perform, seeing how you turned pain into beauty, literally bleeding but still finishing your song, it reminded me that there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. It reminded me that I used to love music, that I used to go to concerts and jazz clubs and lose myself in sound the way you clearly do. Somewhere along the way, I lost that part of myself. And I guess I wanted to find it again, even if just for one song." Lena's chest tightened. She understood loss, understood the way it could hollow you out and reshape you into someone you barely recognized. Her own father had died when she was 19, right before she was supposed to start college. She'd put school on hold to help her mother, and by the time things had stabilized, she discovered music as a career and never looked back. But there had been years where she'd felt like she was just going through the motions, performing without feeling, singing without soul. "I get it," she said softly. "After my dad died, I stopped writing music for 3 years. I could perform other people's songs fine, but I couldn't create anything of my own. It felt like that part of me had died with him. It took a lot of therapy and a lot of bad coffee shop gigs before I could write again. What changed? I realized that he wouldn't have wanted me to stop. That the best way to honor him was to live fully, create boldly, feel deeply. Even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. Alexander reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "You're remarkable, Lena Martinez." "I'm really not. I'm just a singer trying to make rent and book enough gigs to keep doing what I love." "That's what makes you remarkable. You chose passion over security. Most people don't have that kind of courage." "Hotel. Empire. I inherited an empire. There's a difference between building something and maintaining what someone else built." There was frustration in his voice, something raw and real. "Sometimes I wonder what I would have chosen if I'd had the freedom to choose." "What would you have chosen?" He smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "Architecture, maybe. Or music production. Something creative, something where success wasn't just measured in quarterly earnings." "It's not too late," Lena said. "You're what, 32, 33? That's hardly ancient." 33. "And while I appreciate the optimism, I have about 4,000 employees depending on my company for their livelihoods. I can't just walk away because I want to find myself." "I'm not suggesting you walk away, but maybe you could find a balance. Do something creative on the side, even if it's just for yourself." Alexander studied her for a long moment. "You know what? You're right, and I know exactly where I want to start." He pulled out his phone and made a note. "There's a jazz club downtown that's been struggling. I've been looking at it as a potential acquisition, thinking about converting it into another hotel bar. But what if instead I invested in it? Renovated it, kept its soul intact, made it a venue for actual musicians instead of just another corporate space." Lena felt a smile spread across her face. "That sounds amazing. The city needs more live music venues, not fewer. Would you perform there, once it's up and running?" "Are you seriously asking me to commit to a gig at a venue that doesn't exist yet?" "I'm seriously asking you to consider it. I'd want artists like you, people with real talent and something to say, not just cover bands playing the same 40 songs on rotation." "Then yes. Absolutely yes." They were standing very close now, close enough that Lena could see the flecks of lighter gray in Alexander's eyes, could count the laugh lines at the corners of his mouth. The ballroom felt too big and too small all at once, like the world had narrowed down to just this moment, just the two of them suspended in the golden light of the chandeliers. "I should probably go," Lena said, not moving. "It's late." "It is," Alexander agreed, also not moving. "Can I see you again, outside of a wedding venue or a hypothetical jazz club?" Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Like a date." "Exactly like a date. Dinner, somewhere we can actually talk without 200 people around. Tomorrow night if you're free." "I'm free," Lena said, the words coming out breathier than she intended. "I'm very free." Alexander's smile was slow and devastatingly attractive. "Good, I'll pick you up at 7. Text me your address." He handed her his phone, and she entered her contact information with slightly shaky fingers. "This is crazy," she said, handing it back. "We just met. You're you and I'm me, and this doesn't make any sense. The best things rarely do." He reached out and took her hand, lifting it to his lips in a gesture that should have felt old-fashioned, but instead felt intimate and perfect. "Thank you for tonight, Lena. For the music, for the conversation, for reminding me why I used to love moments like this." Then he was walking away, grabbing his jacket from a chair and heading toward the exit. At the door he turned back. "Get some rest, and ice that leg. I'll see you tomorrow." Lena stood alone on the stage long after he'd gone, her hand still tingling where his lips had touched her skin, her mind racing with possibilities and questions, and the kind of hope she'd thought she'd outgrown. This was insane. This was impulsive. This was potentially the best decision she'd ever made. She packed up her guitar slowly, savoring the lingering energy in the empty ballroom. Tomorrow, she'd have a million doubts. Tomorrow, she'd probably call her best friend Maya and have a minor panic attack about agreeing to date a billionaire. But tonight, she let herself feel the magic of it, the pure possibility of something extraordinary beginning. The next morning arrived with brutal sunshine and a text message that made Lena's stomach flip. Asterisk good morning. Hope your leg is feeling better. Still on for tonight. Alexander asterisk. She stared at her phone, sitting cross-legged on her bed with her coffee going cold on the nightstand. In the harsh light of day, the previous evening felt like a fever dream. Had she really sung a private concert for a billionaire? Had he really asked her out, looked at her like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met? Her phone buzzed again. Maya, her best friend since high school and the only person who knew about last night's encounter. Asterisk details. Now, you can't just text me at midnight saying you met someone and then go radio silent. I'm dying here. Asterisk Lena smiled and hit the call button. Maya answered on the first ring. Tell me everything and don't leave anything out, Maya demanded. For the next 20 minutes, Lena recounted the entire evening, from the broken champagne flute to the private performance to Alexander's confession about losing himself in responsibility. Maya listened with occasional gasps and encouragement, waiting until Lena finished before delivering her verdict. Okay, so you're definitely going on this date. Maya, he's a billionaire. I looked him up this morning. His family owns hotels in 15 countries. He was featured in Forbes last year as one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. I'm a wedding singer with student loan debt and a car that makes weird noises when I turn left. So what? You're talented, gorgeous, and apparently interesting enough that he wants to spend his free time with you, instead of whatever billionaires usually do with their free time. Besides, you liked him, right? Like, genuinely liked him as a person, not just as a rich guy. Lena thought about the way Alexander had carefully bandaged her leg, the vulnerability in his voice when he talked about his father, the light in his eyes when she'd suggested he pursue something creative. Yeah, I really did. Then stop overthinking it and go buy something amazing to wear tonight. Where's he taking you? He didn't say, just dinner. With a guy like that, it's not going to be just dinner. It's going to be some incredible restaurant you've never heard of where the bread costs more than your electric bill. Dress accordingly. Maya was right, of course. Lena spent the afternoon trying on every combination of clothes in her closet, eventually settling on a deep blue dress that was elegant without trying too hard. She kept her jewelry simple, just small gold hoops and a delicate necklace her mother had given her for her birthday. Natural makeup, hair down in loose waves. She wanted to look nice, but she also wanted to look like herself. At 6:55 her doorbell rang. Lena grabbed her purse and checked her reflection one last time before opening the door. Alexander stood in the hallway, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a gray sweater that matched his eyes. He held a small bouquet of sunflowers, bright and cheerful and somehow perfect. These reminded me of you, he said, handing them over, bright and unexpected. Lena felt her cheeks warm. They're beautiful. Come in for a second while I put them in water. Her apartment was small but cozy, decorated with thrift store finds and posters from concerts she'd attended over the years. She felt suddenly self-conscious about the worn couch and the slightly crooked bookshelf. But Alexander looked around with genuine interest. "I like it," he said, studying a wall of framed photographs. "It feels like a home, not just a place to sleep. That's a diplomatic way of saying it's tiny and cluttered. It's lived in. There's a difference." He pointed to a photo of Lena on stage, much younger, eyes closed as she sang. "When was this?" "My first real gig. I was 21, scared out of my mind, performing at this tiny cafe that's long since closed. My dad had just died, and I was trying to figure out who I was without him. That night, I realized music was going to save me." Alexander looked at her with such understanding that it made her chest ache. "I have a similar photo. Me and Christina and our father at the opening of the first hotel he built from the ground up. I was 15, thought I was too cool to be excited, but you can see it in my eyes. That pride, that connection to something bigger than myself. I look at it sometimes when I need to remember why I'm doing all of this." Lena arranged the sunflowers in a vase, touched by his honesty. "Okay, I'm ready. Where are we going?" "It's a surprise, but I promise you'll like it." The surprise turned out to be a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a neighborhood Lena had never explored. It wasn't fancy, at least not in the intimidating way she'd feared. Instead, it was charming and intimate, with warm lighting and the smell of fresh bread and garlic filling the air. The owner, an older woman named Rosa, greeted Alexander with a hug and a stream of affectionate Italian that made him laugh. "Rosa's family has run this place for 3 generations," Alexander explained as they were led to a quiet corner table. "My father brought me here when I was a kid. It's not about impressing anyone or being seen. It's just about really good food and good company." Lena relaxed into her chair, relieved. "This is perfect." They ordered wine and appetizers, falling into easy conversation. Alexander asked about her music, her childhood, her dreams. He listened intently, asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just being polite. In return, Lena learned about his complicated relationship with the family business, his love for his sister, his quiet hobby of photography that he rarely had time for anymore. "Show me," Lena said when he mentioned the photography. "I don't usually show people. I sang you an original song last night, Fair's Fair." Alexander smiled and pulled out his phone, swiping through his camera roll until he found what he was looking for. The images were stunning. Cityscapes at dawn, architectural details most people would walk past without noticing, candid shots of people caught in moments of genuine emotion. "Alexander, these are incredible. Why aren't you doing something with them?" "Like what?" "I'm not a professional photographer. You don't have to be a professional to share your work. You could do an exhibition at one of your hotels, or even just create a portfolio. These deserve to be seen." He looked at his phone like he was seeing the images for the first time. "Maybe you're right. I've been so focused on the business side of things that I forgot there could be more to life than balance sheets and profit margins." "Your father would probably be proud that you're running the company so well," Lena said carefully. "But I bet he'd also want you to be happy, to have a life outside of work." "How do you know what my father would want?" "Because any parent who brings their kid to a place like this, instead of some stuffy, expensive restaurant, clearly understood that the best things in life aren't about showing off. They're about connection and authenticity and joy." Alexander reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm really glad I met you, Lena, even though I bled all over your hotel. Especially because of that. You showed me what real dedication looks like. what it means to commit to something bigger than yourself. They talked through dinner and dessert, losing track of time until Rosa came over to gently inform them that the restaurant was closing. Alexander left a generous tip and helped Lena into her coat, his hand lingering at the small of her back as they walked out into the cool night air. "I don't want this to end. To you is that I'll he never top dmitted as they'll t racing his car, black sedan. That was expensive but not ostentatious. Come somewhere with me. Where? You'll see." 20 minutes later, they were standing on the roof of one of Alexander's hotels, not the grand one where the wedding had taken place, but a smaller boutique property with a spectacular view of the city. The rooftop had been transformed into a garden, with twinkling lights strung between trees and comfortable seating areas scattered throughout. "I bought this place 2 years ago," Alexander said, leading her to a bench near the edge where they could see the entire skyline. "It was run down, losing money, but it had good bones. More Persov, O sumps the mostcorporte. This comes from the most rooftop is my favorite unexpected part. And that true sometimes when I love to think." "It's magical," Lena breathed, taking in the lights and the view and the intimacy of the space. They sat close together on the bench, shoulders touching, and talked until the early hours of the morning. About music and art, about family and loss, about the strange paths that had led them both to that wedding reception. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, Alexander shifted to face her more fully. "I know this is fast," he said. "I know we barely know each other, but I haven't felt this comfortable with someone in years, maybe ever. You make me want to be more than just the guy who runs the family business. You make me want to be interesting and creative and brave." Lena's heart was racing. "You already are all of those things. You just forgot for a while. Then remind me," he said softly, leaning in. "Keep reminding me." When he kissed her, it was gentle and searching, a question more than a demand. Lena answered by threading her fingers through his hair and pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. When they finally broke apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Not like that, just stay here with me a little longer. Watch the sun come up. I'll take you home after, I promise, but I'm not ready for this night to end." "Neither am I," Lena admitted. They stayed on that rooftop until dawn painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, talking and kissing and dreaming about possibilities. When Alexander finally drove her home, Lena felt like she was floating, like the world had shifted on its axis and everything was different now, charged with potential. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a pattern. Alexander would finish work and meet Lena after her gigs, bringing her late-night food and listening to her decompress about difficult clients or equipment malfunctions. They explored the city together, finding hole-in-the-wall restaurants and hidden parks, places where Alexander could just be himself without the weight of his name and fortune. Lena introduced him to her world of dive bars and open mic nights, where the music was raw and real, and nobody cared about his bank account. He came to every one of her performances, sitting in the back where he wouldn't distract her, but she always knew he was there. His presence had become a comfort, a constant in her otherwise unpredictable life. And slowly, carefully, she was falling in love with him. The realization hit her one night when she was singing at a small wedding reception, nothing as grand as Christina's event. She was in the middle of a ballad when her eyes found Alexander in the crowd, and the look on his face made her forget the lyrics for a split second. He was watching her with such open adoration, such pure emotion, that it took her breath away. This wasn't just attraction or infatuation. This was real. After the performance, Alexander pulled her aside. "Come away with me this weekend," he said. "I have a property upstate, right on a lake. It's quiet and beautiful, and I want to spend time with you away from the city, away from work and distractions. Just us." Lena knew what she was agreeing to. This wasn't just a weekend trip. This was taking their relationship to the next level, committing to something deeper. And despite the voice in her head warning her about moving too fast, about the differences in their worlds, she found herself saying yes. The lake house was stunning, all windows and natural wood, nestled among trees with a private dock extending out over calm water. Alexander gave her a tour, showing her the master bedroom with its enormous windows overlooking the lake, the kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances, the music room with a beautiful grand piano and recording equipment. "You have a recording studio in your lake house?" Lena asked, running her fingers over the piano keys. "I told you, I used to love music. This was going to be my creative space, but I've barely used it since my father died. I keep meaning to come up here, make time for it, but there's always something else that needs my attention. Well, I'm here now and I'm officially commandeering this piano. Do you play? Not well, but I'll play for you anyway." He sat down at the bench and she joined him. Their thighs pressed together as he worked through a simple melody. It was rusty and imperfect, but there was emotion behind it, a tentative hope that made Lena's throat tight. "That was beautiful," she said when he finished. "It's nothing compared to what you can do. Music isn't a competition. It's about expression, about connection. And what you just played, it connected with me." Alexander turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "Lena, I need to tell you something. These last 2 weeks with you have been the best of my life. You've made me remember who I wanted to be before everything got so complicated. But I need you to understand what being with me means. My life is public. People take pictures of me, write articles about who I'm dating. It can be invasive and overwhelming, and I don't want to drag you into that without being honest about what you're signing up for." Lena had known this conversation was coming. She'd already Googled Alexander, read the Forbes articles and the Society page mentions. She knew what his world looked like from the outside. But sitting next to him in this beautiful, quiet space, seeing the vulnerability in his expression, she realized that the outside world didn't matter nearly as much as what they had together. "I'm not naive," she said carefully. "I know your life is complicated, but I also know that what we have is real. I've spent my whole adult life playing it safe, dating guys who were convenient, who fit neatly into my world without challenging me or pushing me to grow. You're different. You make me want to be braver, to dream bigger. If that means dealing with some photographers or gossip columns, then that's a price I'm willing to pay." Alexander kissed her then, deep and passionate, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. When he pulled back, his voice was rough with emotion. "I'm falling in love with you, Lena Martinez. I know it's too soon to say that. I know we barely know each other, but I can't keep pretending this is just casual for me. You've become essential." Tears pricked at Lena's eyes. "I love you too. God help me, I do." They made love that night with the windows open, the sound of the lake lapping against the dock mixing with their whispered confessions and gasped breaths. It was tender and intense, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the enormous bed, talking about everything and nothing until they fell asleep in each other's arms. The weekend passed in a blur of lazy mornings and long walks, of cooking together in the kitchen and making music in the studio. Alexander pulled out his camera and photographed Lena playing the piano, capturing her in moments of pure concentration. She sang for him, old songs and new, and he listened like every word was a revelation. On Sunday afternoon, as they were packing to head back to the city, Alexander's phone rang. Lena watched his expression shift from relaxed to tense as he answered. "When did this happen?" "No, I understand. I'll be back in the city in 2 hours. Don't make any statements until I get there." He ended the call and ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "Everything okay?" Lena asked. "One of our hotels had a major plumbing failure." "Nothing dangerous, but half the rooms are flooded and we have 200 guests we need to relocate. I'm sorry, I have to get back immediately." "Of course. Let me help you pack." The drive back to the city was tense. Alexander making call after call to coordinate the emergency response. Lena sat quietly, understanding that this was part of his reality, part of what it meant to run a massive company. When he dropped her off at her apartment, he pulled her in for a quick, hard kiss. "I'll call you as soon as I can. I'm sorry our weekend got cut short." "Don't apologize. Go take care of your guests." She watched him drive away, already missing him, already feeling the absence of his presence. But she also felt a strange sense of pride. This was who Alexander was. Responsible, dedicated, someone who took care of his obligations even when it was inconvenient. It was one of the things she loved about him. 3 days passed with only brief text messages, and one midnight phone call, where Alexander sounded exhausted but grateful just to hear her voice. Lena threw herself into work, booking a series of corporate events and a wedding at a vineyard an hour outside the city. She missed him terribly, but she also understood that this was what their relationship would look like sometimes. His responsibilities were massive, and she needed to be okay with that. On the 4th day, Meyer invited her to lunch and immediately knew something was wrong. "You look miserable," Maya said bluntly, stealing a French fry from Lena's plate. "Is billionaire boy ghosting you?" "He's not ghosting me. He's dealing with a crisis at work. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you're sitting here pining while he's off doing whatever rich people do when their hotels flood." "Maya, that's not fair. You don't understand the kind of pressure he's under." "You're right, I don't. But I do understand that you've been glowing for the last 2 weeks. And now, you look like someone stole your favorite guitar. I just don't want to see you get hurt because this guy can't make time for you." Lena wanted to defend Alexander, to explain that it wasn't like that, but doubt crept in. What if Maya was right? What if the reality of dating someone like Alexander was always going to mean coming second to his business obligations? Could she live with that long term? As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. *, "Can you meet me tonight? I have something important to ask you." *, her heart jumped into her throat. *, of course. "When and where? *, the jazz club I told you about." 8 o'clock. *, Maya read the exchange over her shoulder. "Okay, that's promising. Maybe I was wrong. Go, see what he wants and text me immediately after." That evening, Lena arrived at the address Alexander had sent, surprised to find it was in a neighborhood she knew well. The building was old but elegant, with an Art Deco facade that spoke of former glory. The door was unlocked, so she pushed inside, finding herself in a beautifully renovated space. The original architectural details had been preserved. the moldings and light fixtures lovingly restored, but everything had been updated with modern sound equipment and comfortable seating. "Do you like it?" Alexander's voice came from the stage area, where he stood next to a grand piano that gleamed under the stage lights. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and slightly rumpled clothes, but his smile was genuine. "Alexander, it's gorgeous. Is this the club you mentioned?" "It is. We finished the major renovations yesterday. It opens in 3 weeks, and I wanted you to be the first person to see it, the first person to perform here, actually." He gestured to the piano. "Will you play something? Christen the space." Lena climbed onto the stage, her hands trembling slightly as she sat at the piano. The instrument was beautiful, perfectly tuned, and when she pressed the first keys, the sound that filled the space was rich and clear. She played one of her original songs, pouring all of her emotion from the last few days into the music, the loneliness and longing and hope. When she finished, Alexander was standing right next to the piano, his expression intense. "That was perfect. You're perfect." He took a deep breath. "Lena, I know the last few days have been hard. I hated being away from you, hated that I couldn't be there when I wanted to be. But dealing with that crisis made me realize something important. I don't want a life that's just about work. I don't want to be the guy who misses out on everything meaningful because he's always putting out fires. I want balance. I want creativity. I want love. I want you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a key on a simple chain. "This is yours if you want it. A key to this club. I'm offering you a partnership, Lena. Not just as a performer, though I definitely want you performing here regularly, but as a creative partner. Help me turn this place into something special. Help me book artists, design programming, create something that matters. I can handle the business side, but I need someone with your vision and talent to make this place come alive." Lena stared at the key, her mind racing. "Alexander, I don't know anything about running a venue, but you know music, you know artists. You understand what makes a performance space special, because you've performed in hundreds of them. I'm not asking you to have all the answers. I'm asking you to build something with me. To be my partner in this and in everything else. Everything else." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I love you, Lena. I know it's fast. I know we have a lot to figure out, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to build a life with you. I want mornings at the lake house and late nights at this club. I want to watch you perform and photograph you in unguarded moments and wake up next to you every single day. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, though fair warning, I'm absolutely going to ask you that eventually. But I am asking you to take a chance on us. To say yes to this partnership and see where it takes us." Tears were streaming down Lena's face now, happy tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. "You're really serious about this, about us?" "More serious than I've ever been about anything." "Then yes. Yes to the partnership, yes to building something together, yes to all of it." Alexander pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and promise of the life they were about to create together. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling, giddy with possibility. "Come on," Alexander said, taking her hand and leading her off the stage. "I want to show you the office space upstairs. I was thinking it could be your creative headquarters, a place where you can write music and plan sets and meet with artists." They spent the next few hours exploring every corner of the club, Alexander sharing his vision while Lena contributed ideas and refinements. They talked about opening night, about the kind of atmosphere they wanted to create, about the importance of making this a space where genuine talent could thrive without gimmicks or pretense. Around midnight, they were sitting in what would become Lena's office, eating takeout directly from the containers, and making lists of potential performers for the opening month. "You know what I just realized," Lena said, setting down her chopsticks. "If someone had told me a month ago that I'd meet the love of my life because I sliced my leg open at a wedding, I would have thought they were insane." Alexander laughed, the sound warm and unreserved. "If someone had told me a month ago that a bleeding wedding singer would completely change my life, I wouldn't have believed them. But here we are." "Here we are," Lena echoed, leaning over to kiss him. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. The jazz club's opening was a massive success, drawing crowds of music lovers and generating buzz in all the right publications. Lena booked an eclectic mix of artists, from established names to up-and-coming talent, creating a reputation for the venue as a place where you could discover something new and exciting any night of the week. Her own performances became a regular feature, with Alexander often joining her on stage for impromptu duets that delighted audiences. He'd started taking piano lessons again, practicing in the early mornings before work, and while he wasn't a professional musician, his passion was evident. Those moments, when they made music together in front of an appreciative crowd, became some of Lena's favorites. Alexander also started pursuing photography more seriously, mounting a small exhibition of his cityscapes at one of his hotels. The show sold out within a week, with proceeds going to arts education programs. He was learning to balance his business responsibilities with his creative pursuits, delegating more at work, and protecting his time for the things that mattered most. 6 months after they met, Alexander took Lena back to the lake house for a long weekend. It was autumn now, the trees blazing with color, and the air had that perfect crispness that made everything feel alive. They spent Saturday morning hiking through the woods, photographing the changing leaves and talking about their plans for the club's winter season. That evening, Alexander made dinner while Lena played piano in the music room. She was working on a new song, something she wanted to debut at the club's 6-month anniversary show, when Alexander called her into the dining room. She found him standing next to a beautifully set table, candles glowing softly in the twilight. He was nervous, she could tell, his hands fidgeting in a way that was completely unlike his usual confident demeanor. "Lena," he started, then seemed to lose his train of thought. "I had this whole speech planned. I've been rehearsing it for weeks, had it memorized perfectly. But standing here looking at you, all the words seem inadequate." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Lena's breath caught in her throat. "6 months ago, you walked into my life and changed everything. You showed me that success isn't just about building an empire or maintaining a legacy. It's about creating joy, fostering connection, living with passion and purpose. You challenged me to be better, to be braver, to be the person I'd always wanted to be but was too scared to become. Every day with you is an adventure. Every moment is precious. And I don't want to spend another day of my life without knowing that you're my partner in everything." He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "This stone reminded me of the dress you wore on our first date. Blue like your eyes when you're singing, like the depths of everything I feel for you. Lena Martinez, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, make music with me, dream with me?" Lena was crying again, happy tears that seemed to come so easily around Alexander. Yes. God, yes, of course I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had always belonged there. Then he was kissing her, spinning her around the dining room, both of them laughing and crying and overwhelmed with joy. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. I could never regret you, Lena said. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. They forgot about dinner, forgot about everything except each other, making love right there on the floor with the candles burning down around them and the lake glittering through the windows. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other, they talked about the future. A small wedding, something intimate with just their closest friends and family. Maybe at the lake house or at the jazz club. Somewhere meaningful to them, not some grand society event. Christina is going to lose her mind, Alexander said, grinning. She's been pestering me about when I was going to propose since our second date. Your sister is wonderful. I'm glad she approves. Are you kidding? She loves you. She keeps telling me I better not screw this up because she wants you as a sister-in-law more than she wants me as a brother. Lena laughed, her heart full to bursting. Speaking of family, I should probably tell my mother. She's going to have opinions about everything from the venue to the flowers to the guest list. Then we'll let her have opinions. This is our wedding, but it's also a celebration for the people who love us. We'll find a way to make everyone happy while still staying true to what we want. The engagement announcement made waves in the society pages, just as Alexander had warned. Photographers camped outside Lena's apartment and the jazz club, trying to get pictures of the happy couple. It was invasive and occasionally overwhelming, but Alexander handled it with grace, making sure Lena felt protected and supported through all of it. The club continued to thrive, becoming one of the most talked-about music venues in the city. Lena's original songs, which she now performed regularly, attracted the attention of record labels. She signed a deal to record an album, a collection of the songs she'd written over the years, plus new material inspired by her relationship with Alexander. He was there for every recording session, offering encouragement and sometimes contributing photography for potential album artwork. They got married in the spring, exactly 1 year after they'd met at Christina's wedding. The ceremony took place at the lake house, with just 50 guests witnessing their vows. Lena wore a simple silk dress the color of champagne, with wildflowers in her hair. Alexander wore a classic suit and couldn't stop smiling the entire day. For their first dance, Lena sang the song she'd performed for Alexander that first night in the ballroom, the one she'd never shared publicly before. But this time, the lyrics took on new meaning, a celebration of the journey they'd taken together, the courage it had required to reach for love when it seemed impossible. There were tears and laughter, heartfelt speeches from Christina and Maya, and a spontaneous jam session late into the night with various musician friends who'd made the trip upstate. It was perfect, exactly what they'd both wanted, intimate and joyful and real. 2 years later, Lena stood on the stage of the jazz club, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly, announcing a brief hiatus from performing. The crowd groaned good-naturedly before erupting in applause when she explained why. She was pregnant, due in 4 months, and she wanted to take time to prepare for motherhood. Alexander watched from his usual spot at the back of the club, his camera capturing the moment, his heart so full he thought it might burst. They'd already converted one of the guest rooms at the lake house into a nursery, painting it a soft yellow and filling it with books and musical instruments. Their child would grow up surrounded by creativity and love, learning that success wasn't just about wealth or status, but about passion and purpose and connection. The baby, a girl they named Lena after Alexander's mother, arrived on a snowy December morning. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and from the moment she entered the world, she was surrounded by music. Lena would sing to her constantly, and Alexander would play gentle melodies on the piano while Lena dozed in her bassinet. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that balanced family with work, creativity with responsibility. The jazz club continued to flourish under Lena's creative direction, even as she scaled back her own performances to focus on Lena. Alexander had fully embraced his role as both businessman and creative, using his position to support arts programs and foster new talent while still managing the family company effectively. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they returned to the ballroom where they'd met, bringing Lena with them. The hotel staff had arranged a private dinner, and after the meal, Alexander led his family onto the now empty dance floor. 5 years ago, he said, pulling Lena close while Lena giggled in his arms, I watched you bleed through a performance because you were too professional to let anyone down. I thought I was just requesting a private song. I had no idea I was starting the greatest adventure of my life. I thought you were just another rich guy who wanted a command performance, Lena admitted, laughing at the memory. I had no idea you'd become my everything. They swayed together in the empty ballroom, the 3 of them, while Alexander hummed the melody of Lena's song, the one she'd sung just for him that first night. Lena fell asleep against her father's shoulder, peaceful and secure, while her parents held each other and reflected on how far they'd come. The jazz club celebrated its 10th anniversary with a special concert featuring Lena's return to the stage after a brief hiatus. Lena, now 8 years old and already showing signs of inheriting her mother's musical talent, sat in the front row next to Alexander. Their son, Marcus, named after Christina's husband, squirmed beside them at age 6, more interested in his father's camera than the performance, already showing an aptitude for photography that made Alexander beam with pride. Lena took the stage to thunderous applause, looking radiant in a deep green dress that reminded Alexander of the one she'd worn the night they met. She'd aged beautifully, tiny lines around her eyes from years of smiling, her confidence deeper and more rooted than it had been at 28. 10 years ago, she said into the microphone, her voice carrying clearly through the space, this club didn't exist. It was just an idea, a dream that my husband and I shared about creating a space where music could be real and raw and transformative. Thank you for making that dream a reality, for coming here week after week, for supporting the artists who have graced this stage. Tonight, I want to sing you something new, something I wrote for the man who changed my life by requesting a private song and then never leaving. The song was beautiful, a love letter in musical form that chronicled their journey from that first meeting to this moment. It spoke of challenges overcome and joy discovered, of partnership and passion, and the deep contentment of building a life with your soulmate. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the club, including Alexander's. After the show, the family walked home through the city streets, Lena chattering excitedly about how amazing her mother had been, Marcus already editing photos on his father's camera. Alexander held Lena's hand, marveling at how something as simple as requesting a private song could have led to this incredible life. "What are you thinking about?" Lena asked, reading his expression. I'm thinking about how lucky I am. How one decision, one moment of wanting to hear you sing just for me, gave me everything I never knew I needed." "I'm the lucky one," Lena said, squeezing his hand. "You saw something in me that night, something I'd forgotten was there. You reminded me that I could be brave, that I could dream bigger. Everything good in my life traces back to you, having the courage to ask for what you wanted." "Then we're both lucky," Alexander said, pulling her close and kissing her temple while their children ran ahead, laughing and chasing each other down the sidewalk. "Lucky to have found each other. Lucky to have built this life. Lucky to wake up every day knowing that the best thing that ever happened to us was a broken champagne flute and a private song." Years continued to pass, each one adding layers to their love story. Lena grew into a talented singer-songwriter who split her time between performing and music education, teaching underprivileged children the same joy her mother had discovered in music. Marcus became a renowned architectural photographer, his work featured in prestigious galleries around the world. Both children credited their parents' example of following their passions while maintaining strong values and connections to family. The jazz club became a city institution, a place where careers were launched and memories were made. Alexander and Lena eventually handed over day-to-day operations to a younger manager, though they remained intimately involved in the creative direction and often dropped by for impromptu performances or simply to soak in the atmosphere they'd created together. On their 20th anniversary, Alexander planned an elaborate surprise. He arranged for the original ballroom where they'd met to be set up exactly as it had been the night of Christina's wedding, down to the flower arrangements and the placement of tables. When Lena walked in, she gasped, transported back to that magical evening when she'd been a struggling wedding singer with a cut on her leg, and no idea her life was about to change forever. "I thought we should recreate the moment," Alexander said, looking distinguished with silver threading through his dark hair, but still as handsome as the day she'd met him. "Except this time, I want to do something different." He led her to the stage where she'd performed that night, but instead of asking her to sing, he picked up a guitar that had been waiting there. To Lena's absolute shock, Alexander began to play, his fingers moving over the strings with practiced ease. The song was one she'd written years ago, one of her favorites, and he performed it with genuine skill and deep emotion. When he finished, Lena was crying, overwhelmed by the gesture. "You learned to play guitar? When? How?" "I've been taking lessons for the past year," Alexander admitted, looking pleased with her reaction. "I wanted to surprise you, to show you that you've inspired me to keep growing, keep learning, keep pursuing creativity no matter how old I get. You made me believe I could be more than just a businessman, and I wanted to prove to you and to myself that it's never too late to learn something new." "That was the most romantic thing anyone has ever done for me," Lena said, launching herself into his arms. "I love you so much it actually hurts sometimes." "I love you more," Alexander countered, kissing her thoroughly, "and I have one more surprise." He pulled out his phone and played a recording. It was a song Lena had never heard before, but she recognized the voices immediately. Her children, singing a duet they'd clearly written together, a tribute to their parents' love story and the example they'd set for what partnership could look like. "They recorded this last month," Alexander explained as Lena dissolved into happy tears. "They wanted you to know how much they appreciate everything you've given them, everything we've built together as a family." That night, as they danced alone in the empty ballroom just as they had 20 years before, Lena reflected on the extraordinary journey they'd taken. From a chance meeting at a wedding to building a life filled with love, music, family, and purpose. She thought about the young woman she'd been, scared and struggling, trying to make it as a singer while nursing a wounded leg. She never could have imagined that bleeding through a performance would lead to this, to a love so deep and true. It had become the foundation of everything good in her life. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked, echoing her question from years before. "I'm thinking about how a private song changed everything. How you requesting one moment of music gave us a lifetime of harmony." "Then I'd say that was the best request I ever made," Alexander said, spinning her under his arm. "And I'd make it again 1,000 times over." "You won't have to," Lena said, resting her head on his chest and feeling his heartbeat steady and strong beneath her ear. "I'll sing for you forever." Private concerts, public performances, lullabies to grandchildren we haven't met yet. Whatever you want, whenever you want it. That's my promise to you. "And my promise to you is that I'll never stop listening," Alexander replied. "Never stop being amazed by your talent. Never stop falling more in love with you with every note. You're my favorite song, Lena Harcourt. You always will be." They danced until the early morning hours, just like they had on their first date, creating new memories in the space where their story had begun. And when they finally left, hand in hand, walking out into the dawn of a new day, they carried with them the absolute certainty that some love stories were meant to last forever, starting with a simple request and blooming into something extraordinary, something that would echo through generations, a melody that would never fade. Their love, born in a ballroom from a private song, had become a symphony that filled every corner of their lives, every moment of their days, proving that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected beginnings, and that true love, when nurtured with care and commitment and endless creativity, can create harmonies that last beyond time itself.